All right, what's going on there, gents? I have returned. I was thinking about it and I was like, I'm not going to get rich and be able to buy the nice beef at the grocery store if I don't post videos. I also have to remember to start monetizing them again, but I'll probably drag my feet on that one a little bit longer. Had a sick leg workout yesterday. Squats, good mornings, belt squat machine, leg extensions, adductor machine, abs and calves. Bunch of volume on all of the above, and I'm sore, I'm fatigued. This is my third day training. Tomorrow is a rest day. Then I've got my other two sessions, another rest day. So 3 on, 1 off, 2 on, 1 off. That's the split we're kind of rocking with right now. Figured can't get rich if I don't post the videos. Crazy how that works. So we're back for shoulders. Didn't want to drag the whole camera setup and the mic setup into the gym in town where I was doing my squats. I love squatting out here, but I do some in-person work on Tuesdays where I'm just helping the gym that I go to in town, where Max trains in town. Kirsten actually works there now. He's also a physical therapy clinic, and they've been having me help with some of the physical therapists, kind of bridging that gap between like good physical therapy practice and good just general resistance training practice, because good physical therapy looks a lot like downscaled resistance training. Just kind of going over the basics. The head physical therapist slash owner, Billy, I just coach him. He's a power lifter. So do some in-person work on Tuesday. So I figure I may as well work out while I'm there. But I hate dragging around the mic and the phone and looking like a fucking spaz. So that's not happening. I don't got much else to say. So first we're gonna hit our first set of pal-off press. Very fun and exciting. I think that was 13. That's what I'm supposed to do there. Those of you that know have heard me yap about this a lot. I like to do my kind of core training at the start of the session, just as an excuse to get a little bit more warmed up. Many of the people I coach, if I put it at the end, they don't do it. So I make them do it at the beginning. I think it's a good habit for a solid percentage of lifters. I do obliques on upper days, abs on lower days. So right now, obliques is side bends off a 45-degree back extension, which if you've never tried those, fucking killer, really tough, don't need to use a lot of weight. Keep my QL nice and healthy and strong, makes my low back feel good. We've got these pal-off presses as oblique 2. We have leg raises on deadlift day, ab wheel on squat day. Used to be weighted sit-ups for a while there. Given the ab wheel run, because I think if I'm training my abs frequently, that kind of gives me the wiggle room to have fun and switch things up when I'm not really connecting with them well, while still not getting away from, you got to dance with the girl that brought you. If ab work is something that I hang my hat on as helping me increase my big compounds, I can't get away from doing it, but I've got some wiggle room as long as I follow those basic criteria of start each day with 3 to 5 sets of each corresponding movement. All right, okie dokie. Probably will spare you guys filming any more of those pal-off presses because I just watched that back and that was pretty boring. So imagine I did the other side. Imagine later in the workout, I do them as a floater exercise right now, so I could do them at the beginning or as a floater. Floater just meaning spaced through the workout as I see fit. So probably do those before my first set, before my presses, second set before my pulls, and then third set before my assistance work. As long as it gets done by the end. I also like abs as floater exercises. I think it's a good kind of deal. Now on to just like basic movement prep. And this is something that kind of gets misunderstood because you see a lot of really, really big, strong guys doing like pretty extensive movement prep, right? And then you hear a lot of people saying, well, the best way to prep for any movement is just that same movement, but light. Why don't you just do repeating sets at like a low weight on that exercise as the prep? And part of that is very large guys are immobile, and so they can't really do the bar properly without doing some movement prep beforehand. That's there's certain small correctional exercises that are kind of mumbo jumbo most of the time until you start getting like you've done a ton of big pressing and big pulling in your lifetime and you start to lose like external rotation at the shoulder. We get all of these good adaptations, so adaptations to that heavy pressing and pulling, but we also get like maladaptations or bad adaptations. And one of those often for guys who've done just a bunch of pressing in strongman is they start losing kind of their external rotation. And that's where including like a correctional exercise, like something like for me, a behind the neck press, maybe a trap 3 raise, is quite helpful to prevent those maladaptations that come from the fact that I'm already doing a shit ton of pressing and pulling. Doing those in the absence of the bunch of pressing and pulling is probably just exercise that isn't very disruptive to solve a problem that you probably don't have yet. And then the third part of that, like why really big, strong guys, obviously not everybody's smart, but one of the reasons you'll see them do like a lot of movement prep is because they've got so few true work sets to work with in a week. Like maybe they only get 2 to 3 sets of total squats in the week. Anything they can do to front load that session and make those 2 to 3 higher quality is going to be worth it. Whereas if you are a newer lifter and your MRV and your squat volume is a lot more, the best way to practice squats is squats. You don't need to front load with these small things to improve the quality. Just move on to your next set and make those technical adjustments. And that's a lot more relevant of a way to get better. And time spent training these like small correctional exercises is time spent away from doing disruptive stuff. When you can just handle a hell of a lot more volume and benefit from a hell of a lot more volume, why waste our time in the gym doing these weird toe touches, right? That's something that can shift as you get stronger and stronger. And then also it kind of changes with what period you are in the block, right? Early in the block, in like a work capacity phase or a hypertrophy phase for me, I've got a lot of work to get done today. I can't spend forever ditzing around on a floor series. That doesn't make sense. So I'll do a little bit more of like a simplistic warm-up, repeat the bar a couple of times. Like today, my movement prep will be quite simple. I'll do some arm circles, like wrist circle, elbow circle, arm swings, arm circles, some twists, which is kind of an upper body dynamic series. And then I will bounce back and forth between pressing the empty bar for like 10 to 15 reps, do some pull downs, 10 to 15 reps, do some pull downs, work my way up. It'll take me less than 5 minutes. I also do a little bit of T-spine mobility because, as we talked about on that last overhead video, I didn't quite like my inability to draw my upper chest up to the bar. I felt like my extension was coming a little bit more lumbar than I would like, or lower T-spine. So trying to get my upper T-spine moving a little bit better, I think is, some of those things where you're conscious in the session of not just hitting the numbers. It's not just a math equation. There's a very qualitative component to good training. So we want to come in with two objectives, right? Like, what do I want to hit for my numbers? And then what do I want to improve on technique-wise? And the lifters that I coach always have those two-pronged objectives where at least you could walk away with one of them, tend to progress better. And I'm guilty of being a numbers-only guy. So that's my kind of minimal movement prep. If we were late and I'm, a few months from now, I'm going for a 405 overhead press, if there's any little thing that I think prepares me slightly better, I'm gonna do it because I'm late block and I don't have a bunch of assistance work at the end. So we're almost front loading that time we would spend like tinkering with stuff at the end. We tinker with it at the beginning as long as it's not at the cost of fatigue. So where I'm at in a block will change how much fucking mumbo jumbo movement prep crap there is. Here's Max's little encampment in our home gym. You can tell where he occupies. One of the adaptations that happens from getting really big, strong shoulders is they tend to get quite immobile. Most of the guys with the strongest shoulders I know have very immobile shoulders. So you gotta do a little bit of homework if you want to try to preserve as much of that as you can. The shoulders seem to be a little bit different than the lower body, where my legs are pretty big. I can squat a good bit of weight, and I've also managed to not only preserve 100% of my lower body mobility since I was smaller and weaker. It's actually improved. And I know lots of guys with very big, strong legs who are quite flexible. Like extremely flexible. In the case of like Shane Hunt doing like the side splits, Max can nearly get into like a front to back splits. It seems like if you do your homework there, big developed legs does not inherently mean immobility. Whereas when we talk about the shoulders, I don't know any guys with like insanely big shoulders with like extreme shoulder mobility. It's very relative. Like I know guys with good shoulder mobility for a big guy who can still front rack and get into a nice overhead position, but I don't see anybody doing like crazy displays of shoulder mobility. I think part of that's just like a logistical thing of you're kind of running into a lot of muscle, where it's not always like the mobility itself, but doing what I can with the behind the neck work, with the dead hangs, to have a good shoulder mobility for a 260 some odd pound 5'10" guy. It's very relative. You shouldn't. So as you saw there, I like including some of those over and back presses. I'm racking my brain. I want to say there's like a person who they might be named after. I picked it up a while ago. A lot of what I've learned has just been watching training footage of people that are better than me at certain lifts, which doesn't always mean stronger. Sometimes it's lighter weight lifters, sometimes it's less genetically inclined guys that are truly like, man, you are really capitalizing on what you were capable of. You're better at overhead than me, right? Maybe not stronger, but whatever. Like I've picked it up from a couple of guys. I noticed a lot of guys just did like light over and back presses in their warm-ups. Gave it a try. I like it. I'm not going all the way down to my traps like I do with my my behind the neck presses. Just a couple of over and backs with the bar with 95. Sometimes I'll throw in some over and backs with one plate, but that's about as far as I'll take them. It's more of just a warm up, making sure I've got kind of good scapular function going on. Because again, that's something you can lose with time. Your pecs and your lats get really tight and pull you into internal rotation and restrict upward elevation of the scaps, blah, blah, blah. But I find it's a good warm-up, and that's honestly where I picked up a lot of stuff, is just watching guys that are good at lifting weights. Like watch a lot of Olympic training hall footage and be like, oh, they really spend like a while bouncing around in the bottom position of their squats before they work up the weight to make sure they've got a well-balanced bottom position established. Maybe I should do that. Man, they do a lot more dynamic stuff than I do. Maybe I should try that, see what sticks. If something works, kind of doggedly stick to it for a while. Reassess every now and then, but don't be reassessing what you do every session, you know? Apply effort to it instead of like trying to think about something new to do. But these are something I picked up quite a while ago when I first started working on my strict press, and I've kind of kept them in. So just like we talked about earlier, with training not being purely numerical, even though many of us kind of wish it was because maybe we're numerically minded people, and there's kind of more subjective movement quality, being able to read feelings and say, this feeling means I need to do more tricep work, and that will kind of let me get out ahead of an impending issue. This feeling is worth disregarding, right? A lot of getting better at training, unfortunately, isn't just finding this great program, finding the right number of sets per week. There's a lot of subjectiveness to it that comes with being able to come up with theories, and the more you come up with a theory, test it. Come up with a theory, test it. The better you get at the accuracy of your initial guesses. That way, like in warm-ups, you're like, I need to do this, and then I'm gonna come back to this and it'll go better. I should just ignore this feeling. So a lot of guys really like look for like cut and dry answers, and it's like, no, you need to be practicing this fundamental part of getting bigger and stronger, which is coming up with your own theories. Sometimes it can be silly. It's just like, I just think I need to do more sets. Great, that's not silly at all. It'll probably work. Or I need to do the sets a different way. Or my intuition's telling me if I do like partials on this, it'll help a lot. Well, there's a good chance you're wrong, but there's also a good chance you're right. And that helps you calibrate further and further your lifter's intuition, which is massive, whether it be for strength sports or it be for bodybuilding. Sometimes there's cut and dry answers. One of the guys I coach sent me his deadlift single for the end of the block. And it was just the most cut and dry case of like, oh, sick, you just need stronger hamstrings. Like everything about that pull screams, hey, if your RDL goes up and you just hammer a bunch of volume on hamstring curls, you'll just pull more next block. And so that's awesome. I'm trying to convey to him how nice it is when it is that cut and dry, because it's a bit of a pain. Damn, if I just pushed my hamstrings a little further, that means I would have done more. Cool, it just means effort is now like, when we really know what we need to do, which sometimes is the case, that's awesome. That just means raw effort will lead to just raw results. And that's a good bit of fun, just knowing the more I do, the deeper I dig, the harder I recover on my hamstring curls and my RDLs, the more I'll deadlift for the time being until maybe a new weakness pops up. It's clean and crispy. A lot of the time we need to function under, like, again, we need to just come up with different hypotheses and test them. Sometimes a multifaceted approach of like, I think this, this, and this, we're not isolating variables like we would in science, can be good, because while we're not isolating variables, which would be like cool and logical, we're fixing the problem, which is more important, right? Getting stronger is a lot cooler than being like, I'm being so methodical and scientific with this. I care more about getting stronger. Sometimes I'll just throw the fucking kitchen sink at something and it tends to work. Eesh. I just need to not be a lazy bitch and actually do my overhead holds at the end of the set, because that's what you do in overhead events. Ish, abs. Ish. Usually what I'll do is I'll undershoot the first set or two as kind of a feeler set to see where my strength is at for the day, and then take my final set or two a little bit past the target RPE to find the average. Eight it is. I'm playing around with a more upward look point. Different people have different thoughts on this in strongman. Some guys are like, no, just make your strict press as much like your push press as possible. You'll strict press less weight, but that's not the goal anyway. It's to support the push press. And some people like Shane Germain are just like, treat it as this completely separate thing and strict press in the best way to strict press possible. I'm kind of back and forth. I try to limit my layaway because that does make the carryover pretty poor, but an upward look point is something I'm using the strict press and less so on a push press. So we're playing around with it. I'll have that decided probably within the next 2 to 3 weeks for what I'm doing for this prep on the strict press. All right, 8 again, probably 8 on the next one. See where we're at in the final one. Honestly, shoulders are hurting in not a bad way, but they were hurting on Monday just because they're deconditioned. A lot of that I think is the long head of my bicep, not being used to stabilizing that position for so much volume. Already adapting. You get good at what you practice, and you should be good at what you're supposed to be good at for that period of time, or at least that's what pro periodization people like myself preach. You're supposed to be good at reps when you need to be good at reps. You're supposed to be good at singles when you need to be good at singles. Today's going well, so I guess we don't need to throw on the headphones and get hyped up quite yet. We're adapting well, which reminds me, somebody on the Patreon sent me a really good question, which shout out to the Patreon boys. Don't put much on there, but it's a good way to get a hold of me. A couple of guys just regularly send me basically what we were talking about earlier, their training theories. And they're like, hey Sam, how plausible does this sound? And most of the time, honestly, the people that make their way to the Patreon are pretty experienced lifters, and like, that sounds tenable. That sounds very tenable, worth testing. Every now and then someone will send me a theory, and I'm like, hey, I think the chance that theory is kind of what's going on is quite low. Maybe test this theory first, but if not, come back to it. And someone sent me something on there. They're like, hey Sam, I use like kind of the same way you train, like 8 to 12 week kind of American block periodization. And I find that like the first week of the block, I'm so limited by my like gas tank, my lungs, that it really feels like it's not my muscles, right? What can I include in my peaking phases or the last little bit of the 10-week block to keep myself in good shape so I can just hit the ground running? And this is something I used to think about myself. It's like, man, I need to preserve my condition. That first week's kind of getting burnt a little bit. And it's like, well, gradually, if you think that way, you're also going to want to stay peaked while you're in hypertrophy as well, right? And it just becomes concurrent periodization, which can work. Some guys do it well. It's not what I choose to do. And I've always gotten better results from focusing. Like, yeah, of course, we're getting stronger while we're in hypertrophy phases, and we're still doing bodybuilding work in peaking phases, but truly allowing yourself to shift emphasis for periods of the year and get really good at it. And then order those well, which people argue about, like phase potentiation. I've seen some people push against it, but that just means organizing your phases so they lead logically from one into the other. Always got me a lot better results. So yeah, of course, I'm bad at doing reps when I was coming off of trying to be really good at singles. That's not a problem. Just like how when we first reintroduced singles, we might feel weak. That's not cause for panic and cause for like needing to rewrite your hypertrophy phase. It's a feature of the block. And so if you really feel like you're missing out on a productive week, maybe pull back an extra week percentage. If you usually start at 65%, include a 62% week for that burner conditioning week. Maybe add 2 weeks if you really feel like you're losing out and you're like, I really just need to get bigger, Sam. Okay, cool. Tack on a couple weeks to the beginning of your hypertrophy or lessen your jump size through the hypertrophy phase. Badass, right? But there's not necessarily anything wrong there. And I used to try to fix that, and it just led to worse peaking phases where I wasn't like, I was trying to be decent at everything rather than really good at one thing while still working on other things in the background, which brings me to what I'm going to talk about between the next one, because I have to do my next set. 8 reps here would be sick. All right, my apologies. You guys are gonna have to miss my pull-ups. I need to charge the phone. I'm using I think it's an iPhone 5, maybe an iPhone 6 that I found in my drawer to film these. The battery life is atrocious. I found a used iPhone 11 that should get here Friday. That we're gonna try, see if the video is better, whatever. Should have a longer battery life, if nothing else. But we're working with what we got for the time being. So you guys are gonna go charge by the outlet. Imagine me doing 40 total reps, bodyweight pull-ups, few sets as possible. Now we're on to press variation. We're using dips just to try to restore a little bit more mobility for my shoulders and pecs. Recently, I've been able to drive a lot of forward progression with my main presses, and my strict presses and my push presses. So the secondary pressing, where historically when I was weaker and every set of like bench was less disruptive and I needed to do more work, I would also select something that's like very heavy as more of a driver for secondary presses. Now secondary presses are also more like, okay, they're a little bit of a driver, they're good volume, but they're also for preservation of mobility. So things like behind the neck press, get a big range of motion for the external rotation and challenge the upper back. Things like dips, going as low as I and my shitty shoulder mobility can to get into really extreme kind of shoulder positions to keep the pecs mobile, and then close grip inclines for a very, very closed elbow position. Again, I take them all heavy by the end of the block, so they are still a driver, but the thought process has changed a little bit. We're easing into the dips though, because just like the behind the neck press are a big ease the fuck into this because it's a unique position, dips are like that for me. If I haven't been doing something like dips, I take my time. I'm pretty good at dips. I used to do my best, I want to say it was body weight, which was like 260, 270 at the time, plus 275 added weight for 4 reps. So very good at dips. Those were always a staple of driving up my bench press. One of my favorite bench accessories. And I kind of got needlessly good at them, so I rotated them to something else. But we're using a 25-pound plate for 3 sets of 8 today because I don't want to snap my shit up and I want to regain the range of motion before I load heavy, which a shocking number of people don't seem to care about. Not as easy as I thought it would be, goddamn. All right, one more set of these. One thing I was thinking about with the pull-ups, way back in the day, I saw these people get like shitting on people online for bad pull-up form. So I used to do, especially because like I said, I weighed 140, was boxing and had a long history of calisthenics before I started going to the gym. I think I've been training 6 to 7 days a week of exercise since I've been 11. I don't think I've missed a day. I used to just do like calisthenics alongside my boxing training, and then I got into weight training. Just always liked working out, and I saw people get trashed online for their pull-up form, so I went ultra strict. And I remember I didn't make very good progression, and it wasn't like, it was so limiting to be like, sets over there. I couldn't do a perfect chest to bar 3 count negative. It was when I accepted a 7 to 8 out of 10 technique kind of margin for good enough that I was able to find this middle ground of able to see progression with time without seeing too much technical decay. That I've made a lot more progress from the movement. I've done that ever since. You know, Paris has talked me into doing like pull-ups, ultra strict, paused at the bottom and the top as a variation of your main pull-up, but not as your main pull-up, being a great kind of secondary pull-up variation. And that's worked really well, kind of compounded by a talk to Lucas Hatton. And he says he pauses most of his horizontal and vertical pulling to help reinforce his floating front rack position. So that kind of doubled down the utility of those. But one thing I was thinking about is you look at the guys like Dan Green and Konstantin Konstantinovs, and they go well below a 7 to 8 pull-up technique. Dan Green really throws his abs into the start of each one. Like it's like a quarter of a leg raise pull-up, quarter of a leg raise pull-up. And Konstantinovs always did like almost like a kipping pull-up, right? People in the comments are like, yeah, the like big men can't do strict pull-ups. I promise you Dan Green and Konstantin Konstantinovs can do strict pull-ups. They've just determined that a slightly looser form margin was better for whatever training effect they were looking to get out of the exercise, which if nothing else, I'm curious about. At some point, maybe I'll just take getting shit on online and try like a slightly looser form standard to get even more, right? Because it's like, I want to say Konstantinovs, yes, they were kipping, but at 275, he did like a set of 50 pull-ups. And he always cited that as one of his like go-to deadlift acceptance movements, both for his grip and for his upper back. You know, Dan Green knocking out like bodyweight plus 100 sets of like 20 at bodyweight. Again, not the prettiest pull-ups, not my favorite to watch. Not just like regular big man pull-ups, but like below big man pull-ups. But they both are pretty conscientious guys with their assistance selection. And so I've always wondered, like, I'm good for a pretty good number of pull-ups. I think I can do 15 at that like 7 to 8 margin right now at 260 something. I can do weighted pull-ups. I'm no great calisthenics guy, you know. I'm good at dips, but I am certainly no Andrei Smayev by any means. And so I've always stuck to that margin. I honestly want to run an experiment of like a little bit looser form and see what the training effect is versus what I've always done and see if they were kind of onto something that's applicable to me. So I'm gonna go out on a limb and say it was applicable to them and they were onto something, but it was within the context of all of their other assistance work. What gap is this filling? All right, camera's already low on battery again. Fuck this. I'm gonna put my headphones on and put in some hard work on the assistance work. Thank you guys for watching my video. I appreciate you. Always open to feedback. We're feeling out this whole talking format. I'll tell you exactly what I'm gonna do. I know I'm kind of bitching out by not filming my assistants, but we are going to do tricep rope press downs as our triceps, right? Because we go floaters, whatever, floaters. Main press, antagonistic movement, secondary pressing motion, tricep iso, upper back, and then either biceps or forearm health strength work. So we are on the triceps, which today is a rope press down where we back away. So peak resistance is when our forearm is perpendicular to the rope. So when we go nice and up close to a tricep press down, like I teach, if you guys have watched that video of mine, right? Peak resistance is at this angle, so it is lengthened biased in terms of resistance profile. It's not lengthened biased in terms of we're not placing the long head positionally, right? Because there's a difference between being like the resistance profile is lengthened bias versus it's positionally lengthened bias, right? Like preacher curl, forearm parallel with the floor is peak resistance. Cool, this is resistance profile lengthened bias, but it is positionally not because our arm is in front of us, not behind us, so we're not lengthening the long head of the bicep. Incline curl, cool. So we're positionally lengthened biased because we're placing the long head at a longer length, but if our elbows track backwards, peak resistance, forearm parallel with the floor, it's almost shortened biased in terms of resistance profile. That's why Bayesian curls are cool, like they solve both. Arm is behind us and also peak resistance when we're perpendicular to the cable is also in a lengthened position. It's the same idea behind the lying curls Dr. Mike likes. The Bayesian curl is just a better solution to that same question in my mind. Whatever, right? I wanted to do something for triceps where the difficulty was placed at locking out. The rope does that inherently when we have to spread it. And then also when we come away from the cable, we're in close, it's a little shortened biased, lengthened biased. When we back away, we're perpendicular to the rope down here. So it's shortened bias. I like having a shortened bias tricep exercise, not because I think it's great for hypertrophy, but because strength is position specific. So that's gonna be our triceps for the day. Upper back, I want to say it's Lou raises or face pulls today. And then for wrist health, we're doing the wrist roller. So that's the rest of the workout. Appreciate you boys as always. Give me your feedback.